and we've got an exciting guest for you guys today. Brooke Jay has been a colleague of mine for many years. Met her originally on a business trip to Chicago. We had a nice lunch at the Soho House, and we've stayed in touch throughout. And she's got an amazing career in the experiential marketing world, and thought that she would have some great value to add to the audience, and especially as we're moving into this world where the more AI kind of takes over the internet, I think the more human beings want real in the real world, and real in their media. So you see this people collecting VHS, people collecting tapes, people collecting vinyl, people the real world is more important than ever for marketers. So I think this will be a really fun conversation. So before we kick that off, I will go ahead and give you a little bit of her bio. So Brooke is the founder and CEO of Allterrain Collective, widely recognized as the first female-founded experiential marketing agency in the United States. With over 25 years of industry experience, she is a pioneer in shifting brands from shouting one-way advertisements to creating authentic 360 consumer encounters. She co-founded Allterrain in 1998, inspired by the guerrilla marketing tactics she witnessed at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. In 2017, she evolved the brand into Allterrain Collective, a hybrid model designed for a modern tech-empowered consumer. She has led strategic campaigns for global giants, including Nike, Ferrari, Airbnb, GM, and the Cosmopolitan of Las Vegas. Brooke is known for cracking the code on experiential ROI, developing data-driven systems to track a customer journey from initial brand activation to a final product purchase. She began her career in film and event production after a clandestine meeting with a neighbor led her to work for the French hotel group Hotel Sofitel. Brooke operates on the principle that to build brand loyalty, agencies must act as cultural anthropologists, understanding deep consumer behaviors and hero pain points rather than just providing dazzling visuals. Under her leadership, Allterrain was included in the 2023 IT list as a top 100 agency in the US. Beyond commercial work, she is a dedicated philanthropist, notably co-chairing Paws Furball, a leading community health initiative with Aetna. She is currently working on a book project with her mother, focusing on the evolution of experiential marketing and personal growth. Brooke, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate you spending some time with me, spend some time with the audience, and walking us through your career and your story.
Well, thank you, Dylan. I'm glad our possibly non-boozy lunch. I don't know if that was a liquid lunch, but I mean, we became stage 5 clingers with each other. So I really am glad that we've been able to stay connected. I'm so proud of your, this podcast has really taken off, and it's taking you all over the world. And I love watching it. So thank you for having me.
Appreciate that.
Excited to have a conversation with you about my favorite topic, experiential marketing.
Let's go. Well, I'm a big fan of the real world too, so I'll have a lot to contribute, hopefully. All right, so I walked through a pretty extensive bio for you, but why don't you take me back to the beginning? So where'd you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What'd you study? And how did you get into the industry? I think we have a little bit of a cliff note there with the clandestine meeting and starting off at Sofitel, but be curious to hear it from your point of view.
Yeah. Well, I grew up outside of Chicago, the first suburb outside of Chicago, which is Oak Park River Forest. And I went to school both at Southern Illinois. There's a long story about how I wound up there. I was supposed to go to school in Paris, but I did eventually wind up in school in Switzerland, where I was studying international trade and finance. Finished my degree back in Chicago at DePaul. And yes, that clandestine meeting with our neighbor, Cindy Johnson, was the way that I wound up in the business. So, yes.
I love that. So tell me about, getting it, like, obviously you studied something very different in school. What was it about, the early days? It was hospitality, right? Coming into a brand like Sofitel.
Yeah.
What was it that got your excitement to kind of, take that on as a first step? And what was it about that first experience that kept you in the industry for all of your career?
It is, as you called it, a clandestine meeting, and those are those moments that change your life. Um, when I was 17 years old, this woman rolled into River Forest. Her name was Cindy Johnson, as I mentioned. She showed up with a red Viper, and I saw like a pink leather couch rolling off the back of her truck. She moved in next door to us, and I was like, "What is this?" She felt like she just felt like possibility to me, right? She gave me my first job. I was a hostess in a French restaurant in the Sofitel, which is, if those of you who don't know, it's a French hotel chain owned by a company called Accor. And suddenly, from that moment of me being, front of house at a French restaurant, I was exposed to this whole different world. There was like incredibly famous people coming through. I was part of conversations that, of course, as a 17-year-old, I never would have, and just parts of experience. And that's the first time that I really understood what hospitality was about, how you make someone feel seen and welcomed and part of something. And all of that really taught me about, that was my first impression, I guess, of like what it meant to create an experience. And Cindy herself was this incredible entrepreneurial person. Even though she was inside a big corporate structure, she showed me that hard work and creativity really could take you anywhere. She'd been traveling all over the world. And years later, what's funny, I quit my job. I went to study international trade and finance, and I was working at Smith Barney, Shearson Lehman, and it became apparent very soon that I was not cut out for that work. And I quit my job, and she let me couch surf when she was opening up the Miami Sofitel. And that's really where everything changed. She helped me land a job at an agency, and that's where I got introduced to film and event production, and ultimately set me on my path. And so those are those early experiences that really shape the way I thought about moments and environments and the people you meet, and how if you stay open, it can completely change your trajectory. There's a lot of young people that seek advice from me about how I got where I am. And I always say, and it sounds a little hokey, but it's like your network is your net worth. So you got to take responsibility of your relationships, because you never know which encounter is going to change your life.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think, I always try to be open-minded to take any meeting that I can, as long as there's, space in my calendar. I do make it on my terms. Like, sure, I'll have a coffee chat with you. If you meet me down the hill at the coffee shop that's 5 minutes from my house, I'll get on the phone with you as long as it's on my schedule. Because, the more you help people and the more you kind of,
100%.
pour into putting in like good energy out there, I feel like it does travel back to you. Those people might have important jobs someday, or more importantly, it's just the right thing to do,
100%. It's because of Cindy and all the people around me during that time that now I make space on my calendar twice a month to take informational interviews from young entrepreneurs or students, because exactly to your point, you just never know how the world will turn and who's going to be the person that's making decisions about your next business deal. It's the way the world turns.
I love it. All right. So in 1998, you were inspired by a guerrilla marketing tactics that you saw at the 1996 Atlanta Olympics. Be curious to hear a little bit about what was it about those tactics around that Olympic campaign that really inspired you to say, look, this isn't just a campaign. This is a tactic. This is a channel. This is worth investing in an agency that really thinks about marketing in this way.
Yeah. In 96, I was a lowly production assistant at the 96 Olympic Games in Atlanta. It was the first time we were inside the athletes village, which was Georgia Tech. I saw Champion activating there. It was the first time I ever saw anything like that. And with a very simple activation, 30 by 30 booth with cubby holes and t-shirts. And each t-shirt was a flag of a participating country and a lockup of the Champion logo with the Olympic 96 logo. And we watched from our production trailer every day, all day, everybody from the athletes to the major talent that we brought in, we were entertaining the athletes of the games at the time, to people that worked at Georgia Tech come in, pull their shirt, and then above the booth it said, if you want to take one, you have to give one. And so there were Sharpies, and I watched people, write something to each other and exchange the shirts. People came back day in, day out. And it just occurred to me that these people are taking these shirts home and unpacking their stories of their time at the Olympic Games through the narrative of this experience. And I thought, wow, how do we do that? How do we, show up in stride and provide value for somebody like that, and like let the consumer tell the story through the brand lens. And so that led me to quit my job where I was and start Allterrain. So it was like the moment I was like, we've got to figure this out. And experiential wasn't a word, at the time. And so we really left with a totally different idea of what we were going to do, which is always the case with entrepreneurs. We were going to start a webisodic show called Allterrain Johnny that was really about branded content. And while we were doing that, a lot of brands found us.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think you're so right about the context in which, a consumer can encounter a brand in the real world that has some kind of element of like play or interactivity or challenge, or like I love that example of Champion where it was like there was some like not really cause marketing, but it was like more like behavior marketing, like for lack of a better word. Like, hey, like this, we want to give you this thing, but all we ask is that you pay it forward. And there wasn't a tracking mechanism to it. It was a word of mouth igniter, but doing it around something that isn't hokey. It's not like, hey, you win points for getting people to click on your link or whatever. It was like authentic, genuine, feel good, word of mouth marketing driven by this like pay it forward idea, surrounded by one of the most important moment in sports, which was the Olympics, where like I always say, like, I've been steeped in travel media for the last year and a half. And when I experience a brand, when I'm either on vacation or traveling for business, it's a different experience than when I experience that brand, on the internet in a banner ad or in a YouTube ad, or when I see a billboard even, it's like you're having an experience with a brand around the context of making memories with your family, or making memories because you're getting to do some type of exciting business travel. And that association with that brand will always bring you back to that moment. And that's why like experiential is so powerful.
It is. It's very powerful. And yeah, we left the Olympics. I had a business partner at the time. There's so many funny stories about how George Clinton from the Parliament Funkadelic was part of our decision-making to quit our jobs, but we can save that for a whole other day. And we came back to Chicago and took that like momentum, to really start thinking about what the next wave of brand and consumer experience would be. And yeah, we came back at, I think you had asked me another time, like how did we start having those early conversations, when we were basically, a little bit rudderless as young entrepreneurs. We were really young, and I think you had asked me earlier on in this conversation about how did we start selling the idea of a moment. And that obviously we were very inspired by what we saw at the Olympics, but we were young. And I guess you would say I grew up in Chicago. I grew up with all the cool kids. There are now all the people that own the hotels and restaurants and everything like that. So we were the influencers of our era. And so when we started Allterrain, we didn't really know what we were doing, to be honest with you. We set out, as I mentioned, to create this webisode show. So we weren't really setting out to sell experiential, but we were trying to stand up this idea of this branded content. We were throwing parties, we were curating scenes, we were bringing all these like really cool kids together. This was the era when Schwimmer and Jeremy Piven and John Cusack, we all kind of grew up in this scene in Chicago. And Allterrain was like right in the middle of it, creating these wild parties, and the brand started coming to us. At first, it was like clients like Bacardi and Anheuser-Busch, and they wanted to plug into what was happening. And they saw it all as if they showed up in the right environments with the right people. It just didn't build buzz around their brand. It drove sales. And that was the beginning of really understanding how experiential could work. But we were still pretty loosey-goosey, if I can be very transparent. And then General Motors found us at one of our events, and it changed everything for us. They approached us and they said, "We like what you're doing. You've got, these amazingly interesting people lined up around the block to sit in one of our cars. Can you be in Detroit and next week?" And we rolled into Detroit, and they asked us if we could be in 55 markets in 6 weeks to take over some of their major league sponsorships. And of course, at that moment, you're like, of course we can do it.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
For sure, no problem. So, but within weeks, we had to evolve from being these like culture creators to like really strategic partners. We had to scale systems. We had to translate that same energy that like was driving us with this like cultural relevancy into corporate environments, and bringing the GM brands to life through these major sponsorships and street level campaigns. It was wild. And it really showed us, how business was done. It was a big shift for us. And we went from selling access to culture to providing culture, to corporate America, in real life, and then figuring out how to drive results and sales through that as well. So major shift. I think that it was definitely a life changer for me.
I think that segues easily into the idea of cracking the code on ROI for experiential. For a long time, experiential has gotten, I wouldn't say a hard time, but most forms of media that is harder to measure, whether that's outdoor or whether that is radio or whether that is linear television, or any of the other things that don't have direct one-click attribution or a way to attribute naturally in a digital purchase funnel. Developing data-driven systems to track consumer journeys from a brand activation to a purchase is, of course, the holy grail of experiential marketing. But I think about the way in which people buy something like an automotive purchase. Really the goal is to drive test drives, right? Like there's nothing that's going to put consideration in the mind of the consumer more than sitting in a car and driving it around and feeling not only how does it handle and what is the experience of the luxury of the interior and how tech enabled is it, but it's like, that's why there's rental car fleets that give away the cars almost for free. That's why, when I went to the experiential activation at South by Southwest this year for Rivian, I was like, wow, I've never thought about owning an electric truck, but damn, this thing looks pretty awesome on the interior. I could see myself in one of these. Or, even getting a ride from a friend in a Hyundai Genesis, and thinking that Genesis were kind of like not super fancy, like they were kind of like a tier 2 luxury car, but then you actually ride in one and you're like, wow, this is pretty comparable to a BMW experience. How do you drive that, that data-driven purchase path, but also how do you explain to brands like sitting in a car is so much more valuable than watching a YouTube ad or seeing a banner or even seeing like a movie trailer or something like that?
Yeah. Well, we can track sales. I mean, especially in the automotive world, the GM, as we just talked to, kind of like put us on our trajectory, really taught us a lot about this topic, and what we learned is that, the way we think about it, it's pretty simple. You got to meet the consumer in stride and offer real value. And that's the beginning of it. So that might be something simple the relationship starts with like a co-branded item. So like for us with GM, we were at all their Major League Baseball and soccer and some of their hockey games all around the country. And so we would build these co-branded items that are something useful in the moment, if it was like a festival. And there was always like an exchange, but it was not in a transactional salesy way. It was an opportunity. People were obviously fans of like the team or the moment or wanted the swag. But it started a conversation with someone who was part of the exact same experience we were standing in with the card. So and then we trained our teams to really read the person, so in front of them, and tailor the interaction. So we would want to have these really authentic conversations. So like if a dad walked up with a kid and we were talking about the car, we would be talking about safety and reliability. And if it was a younger buyer, we would be talking about performance. And so from there, we would create this like clear path to action. So we build the incentive into the next step. So with GM, because the point was to get people to retail, we would give them an incentive. So while we're talking, we had some great dwell time. Dwell time is really important because you really get an opportunity to have an understanding of what is important to the consumer. And we were like, now think about BAs are actually funneling this information into a major corporation's sales force, right?
Wow, wow. So you're almost like an extent. You're like the car. You're almost like an extension of the guys that are on the car lots, but you're out in the wild, so to speak. You're not.
100%.
You're not. Yeah, and it's funny because like the way you talk about your field reps, you talk about them like in the context of like this is how salespeople should act, right? You're like you're the first touch in the sales journey. You know, they might not be ready to, you know, like showing up to a car lot is a different level of intent than walking up to a demo model at a baseball game. But, you know, it's in the same family, right?
Yeah. And it begins the relationship, right? And this can be done with any type of product, but GM really had done it well, taught us how to do it well. So, you know, from that conversation, we've got their data. We will incentivize that person to go to the point of purchase. So retail, for this case, it was like dealerships, of course. And so that incentive could be a gift card that you only get activated for, you know, anywhere between 150. It could be depending on the brand's value of a test drive. And so if the consumer that we met at the game would go to the dealership and open that gift card, we are now tracking that interaction. So now they're there. And, you know, there's a high probability of people buying a car or buying a product once they've had it in hand or in the trial mode. So, so we would create offers and QR codes. In these days, we make QR codes, anything that's trackable from the time we meet somebody at an experience that can be redeemed either online or in specific environments. And so that's where the measurement becomes real. And then once the consumer redeems or engages further, we're able to track that data back to the client's sales system. So tracking who moved from interaction to consideration to purchase. And in some cases, we're even closing sales on site. You know, it depends on what kind of product it is. Like with the Illinois Lottery, who we worked with for 15 years, we were selling tickets left and right. We became one of their biggest sales funnels. But the key is it only works if the marketing and sales team are fully connected from the start. And that happens so rarely in the world. It's like church and state, right? So we design these programs hand in hand with both the sales and marketing teams. So data is captured, shared, and actionable all the way through, you know, because this is why I always say experiential marketing shouldn't just be about vibes. It should, or impressions, you know, or, you know, how many social posts you got out of it. It should create velocity. And we've proven that time and time again. And I'm on a lot of stages talking about this. I'm on a lot of, you know, I'm on my own social media, you know, just talking about this because there is a lot of misconception. And we're currently working with a major client right now who we just rolled out their entire retail, a new retail brick and mortar experience for them. And they're a very data-driven company. And we're working on, they focus everything on that MMM model, right? And so we're working very closely with some measurement experts to figure out further how experiential can be measured in the same way we measure out of home, the same way we measure social and digital. So we'll check back in a couple months and I'll tell you how that's gone. But a lot of people have climbed that mountain. We haven't gotten a lot further, but Allterrain's always been able to find levers inside experiential moments that can track sales. And it's kind of one of the things we're known for besides our creativity.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, honestly, you've talked about it most eloquently of the, hundreds of experiential agencies that I've talked to. I think, many times it's like, oh, don't worry about that. Brand love and, engagement is the goal. But, some brands, we obviously know that experiential works. But, to have it be completely esoteric and have it be something that you can't measure or shouldn't try to measure or shouldn't always be striving for that same level of attribution that you can learn through digital footprints. Maybe it'll never get quite there, but ROI measurement as a goal, I think, is the important thing. So I love that. So let's talk about, the idea of mega events. We're moving into some pretty exciting times in the landscape of the next couple of years. We've got LA 28, we've got World Cup, we've got America 250. Those are three of the, top kind of nationwide marketing beats that we have, here in the US. We just came out of Augusta. We've got the F1 season. We've got, sports being as big as it's ever been. These cultural moments like music festivals and concert tours. It seems like no matter what happens to the economy, no matter how unstable things get from a geopolitical perspective, a study just came out that said millennials are the most traveled generation in all of measurement in history. Like millennials travel, that's it. I, am the oldest potential millennial, and I can attest that I pretty much, live to save money and travel and go have experiences. You've heard of this idea of the experience economy or the transformation economy or the celebration economy. How should brands be thinking about these kind of three major tent poles that are coming up in the next year or two? And, obviously not every brand can go and sponsor the World Cup. Not every brand can be a part of the Olympics, but you've always been an advocate for guerrilla marketing. How can brands maybe potentially attack these cultural touch points from kind of the top level, but also how do they do it on a budget that allows them to punch above their weight class as a challenger brand?
I love that question so much. You don't have to, especially in the world where you've got digital amplification, right? So, it's really being smart about how you show up and like who you partner with in those moments and in smart collaborations that make you culturally relevant. So, you don't have to spend millions and millions of dollars to make noise. I think you really just have to be authentic to who you're trying to first of all, focus on. Like at the end of the day, these are events that are such mass audiences, and most brands are not, most brands, I shouldn't say most brands, several brands that we work with are mass brands, but some of the brands that want to be part of these smaller brands are really focused on a certain consumer, So it's really about showing up around that event. Let's use FIFA World Cup as an example. There's a ton of brands that are not going to be able to participate because they have their partnerships locked. So they have to find other ways to do it. They have to find other smart collaborations. So I don't want to, like, I was about to drop a strategy. We were about to execute. Like, and we're going to do this. But I would say that, find the right cultural facilitators, right? Whether that be soccer clubs or social soccer clubs or up and coming, emerging, fashion brands that are not going to be, connected to the big thing, but they have a huge voice, right? So find important ways to partner up with people that have the ear of your audience around these big tentpole moments, and then do something that's important to the consumer you're focused on. Give them accessibility. A lot of these people that are going to be watching the game, they're never going to have a ticket to any of these events, from F1 to Super Bowl. So how do you show up in their community with a partner that they admire? If they don't already admire your brand or don't even know about your brand, how do you make these smart collabs that benefit the let's call it the creator, and also benefit the brand? I think there's a lot of ways that boats rise together in these moments, by doing smart partnerships, by being generous to the communities that are fans but will never get close to a seat in a stadium. So how do you bring the excitement of the big game or the big race to them in ways that are accessible for you? And those could be things that happen in restaurants and bars, at public parks, in schools. There's so many ways to get creative about generating an audience around a big game and a big moment, where you don't have to buy into a massive sponsorship. I have a good example for you. Last St. Patrick's Day, we worked with Hijacking, and they were trying to do something around St. Patrick's Day, which is like, the Olympics of beer and out bev. And they didn't have a massive budget. They had this is just an example. I'm sorry if I'm long-winded. Let me know if this.
No, I love it. I think the case studies are great.
Yeah. So what happened here was that the regional marketing team got some extra budget because they were trying to battle it out with Mick Ultra. Mick Ultra had the share of stomach for the Heineken Silver product, which is lower alc, lower calories. And they did a pricing strategy where they were like priced equal to Mick Ultra. And then the next phase of their spend was like, how do we drive awareness and consideration and trial with a Gen Z millennial audience? And they didn't have it wasn't a tiny budget, but it wasn't a mass budget. So we took a moment. So this is like talking about hijacking a moment. So in Chicago, we dye the river green. We have over 400,000 people IRL anywhere around that moment in time, not to mention it's being covered by every media outlet, because it's such a funny thing to watch, the actual like river being dyed green in real time. So they weren't a sponsor of it. Heineken wasn't. There was another beer partner. A lot of other big brands had spent a lot of money to sponsor this big event. And so we did something completely irreverent. We tapped into millennial and Gen Z fandom, which is a lot of them are into EDM music. We partnered with ARC Music, which is the big EDM festival in Chicago. They do stuff globally. And so we immediately bought credibility, which is what I'm talking about earlier, with the partnership with ARC. They had a sold out show the night before the dyeing of the river green with a DJ out of Galway, Ireland, called DJ Kedema. And so we wrapped a series of those Skyline cruises, and we opened up a sponsorship for 140 tickets. That's all we could fit on this boat. And we had 4,000 people RSVP within 24 hours. And we didn't have a lot of time to outfit the boat, wrap it like professionally. So we wrapped it as quickly as we could the morning of this event. Then shoot flags and everything like that. And then we dressed our guests. Everybody that arrived who had won a ticket got a silver puffer jacket. So they became part of the decor. It wasn't a heavy lift for us. And then we put a rave on the water right behind the sponsored beer.
That's so good.
And we live streamed it. We had over 1 million people watching it because of the power of ARC, the power of Kedema. And we hijacked this moment. We took over the moment. It was, incredibly impactful for the brand. We also tagged the brand into a 13,000 person ticketed bar crawl that happened right after. So we released these people after this 3-hour rave on the water that caught every piece of social media you can imagine. and then release these silver puffered people out into the world, and just so many sightings and people on Instagram. The metrics were off the roof. We won tons of awards for it. And it was one of those moments where a challenger brand in the moment, I know we don't ever think about Heineken as a challenger brand, but in a regional capacity, they were, compared to the amount of money, Jameson and Anheuser-Busch and Guinness were spending against this day in Chicago for a third, not even like a minuscule part of a budget like that. We were able to really make a lot of noise and bring people into the moment to celebrate this experience. So I use that as an example, mainly because it's what other brands could be doing. We worked with a cultural, instigator like ARC, and found a moment in time that we could own, and then found a way to make it from the one-to-one to one-to-many through these live stream, which ARC is known for, and it wound up being wildly successful. So I use that as a good case in point about how other brands can think about owning a moment without having to be the title sponsor of the big thing that's happening.
Yeah, I think that's such a great insight, because what you really did was you created exclusivity, right? Like when you know you can't be the brand that is kind of casually in front of 400,000 people, well, then you could be really, really important to 150 people on the boat. And it's that FOMO moment of like, oh, like all these people are on the boat doing something really cool. Like it's almost like the uncool thing to be part of the 400,000 that are just walking around with Gen Pop, like seeing what's going on. And then you kind of like create this exclusive moment that's tied to like the FOMO factor. And then you be kind of like, maybe you're not going to reach all 400,000, but you're going to reach a good chunk of them with, like you mentioned, like a way smaller activation budget.
Yeah, and we were giving back to the community. Those 400,000 that were on the river walks and on the bridges, we stopped and we were performing to them as well.
Yeah,
so
you were engaging with them as well.
Yeah, we were throwing. They were, we're throwing beads, and they were throwing things back to us, and it became like a big engagement. But we basically would pull up on a huge crowd on the Chicago River and like play to them. So not only was there a dance party going on in the boat, but all of a sudden the Riverwalk became a big dance party. So it's like littler things that could become much bigger. And then obviously through the magic of social media and having a partner who has clout and great reach like ARC, we were able to really expand the reach of the program. It's funny, one of the girls that works at Allterrain was in a party in New York a couple of weeks ago at a house party. They're like 28-year-olds, and they had that live stream on in the background as just the music of the night for their party. So that, it lives on. Even these live streams can live on. So it was just made me even so happy as we keep clicking back to that live stream to see it just like keeps building momentum.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you've also, identified this other cultural trend within Gen Z, which is the idea that they value creation over consumption. We see this in the travel media space where, the proverbial stamp on your passport is no longer a stamp in your actual passport. In fact, some locations don't even stamp your passport with a stamp anymore. They do it digitally. But the idea of the digital passport stamp is the Instagram reel that you put on Instagram that memorializes the fact that you traveled to this cool moment in culture or this cool location, forever. The area of the branded photo op is fading in favor of more authentic creative stations where guests get to build digital artifacts that are essentially take homes. How can brands create these moments of authorship versus consumption without it feeling like a staged moment or a transaction?
Yeah, I think that's just leaning into the passion of your crowd, right? Into the audience. I think Pinterest just did a great job of this at Coachella. They had almost like a photo-free zone where anybody that got access to their footprint there was like making stuff, things that you could put in your hair. I don't know exactly what was going on inside there, but I was proud of Pinterest for analoging it a bit in the moment, which is such a, an Instagrammable feast, lack of substance to some degree at Coachella. Here's a brand that like took people's phones, put them down, and asked them to make some stuff, right? And people were thrilled to do it. So I think to make it authentic, it's got to be like relevant to what the brand is about, right? If it's a food product, if it's a, if it's a service, you have to really think about what's the analog thing that will connect that core memory back to the brand. And then what's the takeaway for that, the keepsake, right? So that it's something that they hang on their fridge or use every day. So I think it's just really understanding who you're talking to, what drives them, what lights them up, what's going to be something that they value, and and then create an analog moment or a maker moment that feels on brand and connected, but also feels like you're listening to what these people care about, so to speak.
Love it. So you're currently working on a thought leadership project. You're working on a book with your mom that also focuses on the evolution of experiential marketing and personal growth. Tell me about your mom, and how is she relevant to your creative process here and coming up with this book, and tease the book out for us a little bit if you can.
Okay, it's not, those are two different books.
Oh, got it. Okay, so you're doing two different ones.
One book, yes, I'm working on some content platforms around experiential, and then the project with my mom is a semi-autobiographical story about our lives, because we've had some pretty interesting lives, and so we've been working on it. It occurred to me that I'm not going to have my mom forever, and both of us have like very, very cinematic lives. Let's just put it that way. And so we've been meeting and putting together an outline for a book that, like, I always like to say, it's like the Yaya sisterhood meets Sex in the City, kind of like. But not as much a business and marketing platform. It's more of a personal project that I'm just loving, because I'm getting to spend time with my mom and really unpacking stories from her life that are so telling about how she became who she is. So
wow, I love that.
Two different.
That's really cool. I love it. I think it's great. I think I've heard stories of folks who've done podcasts with their parents at late stages, and it's like you want to know that family history, and like you said, you take advantage of the fact that your parents are around. They won't be forever. And however you're able to capture that memory and that experience of kind of going through the family tree. I think that's why I like these these apps, like can't think of the name of it right now, but the ones where you track your Ancestry. They're fascinating.
Storywell, yes, they're very fascinating, and I think again, it's a sign of the times that people are trying to understand purpose and meaning and get out of their phones a little bit, and really honor life, how we got here. I really sometimes miss the days, I'm probably sounding an old piece, but of when social media wasn't around and we were more present with one another. But now we have to find new ways to make authentic connections.
Yeah, well, you do see the trend of digital detoxing. I leave my phone in my office at night. So once my family kind of calls me to dinner, I leave my phone in the office. I still have my watch on, so I can kind of like see what's happening. But, like at least I'm not grabbing my phone unless there's an emergency. And I did, for a period of time, I did leave my phone at home on Sundays. Just like no phone on Sundays. Even as a map, because a lot of the cars have maps now too. And the first week it was like horrifying and liberating at the same time, and by the third week it was actually something that I really look forward to. When I started my my business, I had to give that up for a little while, just because, as as an entrepreneur, you kind of have to be always on, at least for the early days. So But yeah, I think, you hear some stories about high schoolers right now that like they're deleting social media from their phones and stuff. It's crazy.
I think it's telling, and the pendulum always swings, right? And now we're back into the experiential economy, the experience economy. Guys like Gary Vaynerchuk are talking about analog and entrepreneurs starting businesses that are just about like going for walks with old people, and like all kinds of unique business ideas that have nothing to do with you know downloading an app or AI, being a creator and offering a workbook of some sort. I love it. And there's always got to be balance, right? I mean, you know I love what you just said about Sundays. I think that's brilliant. I think I need to try that. And but also, digital's made our lives so much easier, and
Sure.
we move faster, and we are able to um, get more things done with it. So there's just like, where is this? The idea is like, we can't deny we live on our phones. They guide how we discover and navigate, as you just said, and share almost everything. So, every IRL experience that we're doing right now always needs a digital leg. It's just the reality of it. But for us, digital should amplify the experience, not compete with it.
I love that. All right, so we made it 46 minutes in without talking about AI, but since you brought it up, you've talked about using AI as the quiet co-pilot versus replacing humans or leading strategy. How is AI being used, in your opinion, for scoring personalized attendee,
Yeah.
matching and the works that you're doing, figuring out a way to measure performance and some of the ROI questions that we had. You do see an interesting use of AI. Last year at Cannes, there was a lot of personalization of experiences.
Yeah.
So you would go to the Amazon port, you would do a little, survey, and then it would spit out a unique fragrance that was matched specifically to your tastes and likes. Or you would go to the IMDb booth, and you would again, give it some data about yourself, and then it would create a custom film, and you would walk in a room of one and see a film that was made just for you. So there is this kind of cool part of like using AI to customize experiential marketing to make it more individual. I'd be curious, what are some of the coolest things that you think AI will do for the experiential industry without taking away, its essence, which is all of the things that we've been talking about, which is a thirst for real life experiences.
Yeah. I mean, we're doing some cool stuff with AI in the brand to consumer space, like creating custom merch, like on the spot. Some of
That's
the
cool.
like wearables, and you show us a picture of your dog, and then tell us about your favorite day in the life, and it's like your dog and you in space, whatever it is.
That's cool. Well, one that I'm thinking of, like I was at a Bush's Baked Beans activation at Expo West, and they had a place where you could get a apron custom
Mhm.
custom stenciled. So I got mine for my wife, and it's like, I love beans, and it's like a funny apron, and like every time I see her in that apron I laugh, and it's like I'm brought back to that moment. So yeah, the
Perfect.
custom
That's
is,
a
I feel
perfect
like that
example.
customization element is key.
That's cool. But for yes, and I love that, and I do think that really, she's wearing the apron. Like
Yeah.
normally you would have brought her home a branded apron, and she'd be like, out of here.
Right.
So
Yeah. It has to be great quality. It has to be something that people want to actually like. It can't just be like a throwaway. It can't be junk that just goes in a landfill. It's got to be like useful and high quality.
no, yeah, 100%. I agree, and I'm aligned. What I love about AI is really the back of house usage for us. So we're able really quickly to on many things. Like we use a app called Placer AI that helps us find heat maps for where we should do pop-ups. Like it uses data for maybe going back 3 to 5 years about where everybody went after Coachella, or so we figure out we use AI for things like that. We use AI to build visuals for us for pitches and selling things. We can take in actual dimensions of a room and load up images of things that we want to put in a room and stages and lighting and everything like that. And we can show the client like within about 80% accuracy, this is what you're buying. And we didn't have to spend a week rendering it and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars rendering it out. We can just show them. And so that's been really helpful in like communicating creativity. It's helping us with organizing data. So like I mentioned, the big project we're closing out right now, we did 667 events between January 15th and April 15th. And we're like analyzing that data through AI. There's so much to unpack about the consumer engagements and the downloads of apps and appointments booked and all this stuff. So, there's a lot of great work that's done, maybe not in the sexy consumer facing space, that's really helpful with AI and experiential.
I love it. All right. Last question. In 2017, you evolved the agency into this idea of the Allterrain collective. You decided that a fixed agency was dead and that a collective allowed you to move faster in today's vibe-driven culture. Tell me about that kind of redesign, if you will, that organizational structural redesign, and how's that going?
It's going great. It didn't start out from a great POV. I had a business partner for almost 20 years, 19 years. We started the company together and went through a business divorce in 2017. And, lots of great key learnings from that. So many great key learnings that I talk about a lot when I speak to in leadership forums and on the dais about entrepreneurship. So, but it was like more of a forced shutdown of Allterrain 1.0, and we don't always call it that. And then I looked down the lens of also what was happening in the immediate, landscape of big agency. They struggle, right? It's big agencies struggle with, you lose one big client, and we're seeing it right now. I mean, Dylan, the people you're talking to, are shedding thousands of people, right, at a time.
Oh yeah. It's crazy out there for sure.
And so I wanted to rebuild Allterrain through a modern lens. So the power of collective partnerships. I've been in the industry for 28 years. I dreamt about working with certain creative directors or certain fashion designers or certain musicians and integrating them into our creative process in a way that, I had a really deep bench of people that I had to work with because I was paying them, So now we have an amazing full-time team, very big, nice mid-sized team who are all wonderfully capable and so talented. But when a project comes in now that might give us the opportunity to bring in such a fresh perspective, somebody who would be so off-brand that you would think you bring in this guy who's never had anything to do with luxury automotive, but let him do some thinking around a new launch or a new initiative. And so Allterrain Collective was born in 2018. We've tripled the revenue of our initial agency and been able to collaborate and conspire through this like hub and spoke model where we've got, like I said, a great full-time team, and then we plug in subject matter experts or, just incredible creative people that come from a different walk of life that wouldn't normally find themselves at a strategy table to talk about oatmeal or, taxes, and so it's been such a rewarding experience for me. I think there's a lot of companies that have followed this model moving forward, especially after COVID, when we're closed and people were let go. And so, so 2018 was the rise of Allterrain Collective. And we find ourselves, as I said, we're in our best financial place we've ever been over the 28 years as far as rev. And just this momentum and movement. If you talk about us on the street, you know, we're working with so many more people because we have the capacity to do that. And so I'm loving it. I'm thinking it's obviously the way of the future. It is the future, and the future is now in the way we're running this business. And I couldn't be happier with this model. I honestly wish we had introduced it even earlier on in the company's evolution, because we, you know, the thinking and the creativity coming out of the company is just off the charts.
I love it. Well, sometimes in those, you know, unfortunate moments, whether it's a management, you know, shakeup or whatever the case may be that caused you guys to pivot, you know, sometimes beautiful things are birthed out of that struggle. And I think in addition to that, you know, I love this idea of, you know, why do brands continue to use agencies no matter how many times we've been told that we are irrelevant and you know, we're on the verge of extinction. You know, I have Rashad Tabakawala says, you know, agencies are like cockroaches, right? Like we can survive a nuclear bomb if we need to, because at the end of the day, there will always be a need for outside perspective. And sometimes you just can't find that within your four walls because of a speciality, like knowing something like experiential marketing really well. And why would you need to or want to have that expertise in-house at all times? But I think the other thing that you mentioned is, you know, agency people get to work on different problems every single day. They get to work on a slew of verticals, size of companies, business models. And that's why I think some of the best talent go to agencies, because they want to always have that opportunity for curiosity and stimulation. And no diss to our friends in brand management and who spend their life in service of particular verticals or particular brand, because that's a very unique skill set too. But, you know, sometimes you need outside thinking in order to solve deep strategic issues. So I love that idea and I love that model. Brooke, always great to chat. Really love getting to spend time with you and reconnecting. If folks want to keep up with your thinking and or connect with you at the agency, where would you like to send them?
They can follow me on LinkedIn. They can visit allterrain.net. They can follow me at Brooke J at on Instagram, or Allterrain on Instagram. We would love any opportunity to continue this conversation. Dylan, I find the work you're doing fascinating. I appreciate your comments about agency and the opportunity that when life gives you a big pivot, how it can be such a great fit. So let's keep championing all of those things.
I love it. Well, thanks again for your time. And for those of you at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or subscribe. A honest review on whatever podcast platform you might be listening on is how we find a larger audience organically. And if there is a brand out there that wants to take advantage of these cultural moments coming up in the next 2 years, now's the time to start thinking about it. Maybe a young person who is interested in learning more about how you get into this world, or how to just, you know, structure that idea of the informational interview, or how do you give back, and, you know, how do you tap into those networks? Your network is your net worth, so to speak, or just somebody who you think would benefit from hearing the show. Don't forget to share. And with that, Brooke, I'll wish you a great day and look forward to seeing you next time I'm in Chicago.
I hope so. Or I'll be in San Diego soon. Cocktails on you.
Let's do it.